All right. This is John Krysinsky, Pittsburgh Soccer Now on Pittsburgh Sports Live. With me is Josh Hakala. Josh, you and I have connected many times over the past, especially the past probably 5 to 7 years or so. You manage a site called thecup.us, which is really, to me, the ultimate resource for really one of the most exciting, maybe underrated sporting events in the United States year after year, and that's the U.S. Open Cup, the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. Josh, maybe set the table for us. Let's just see. There might be some just kind of average Pittsburgh sports fan, maybe even Pittsburgh soccer fans, but they just don't know a whole lot about the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. Tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us about your website.
Well, the best way I can put it to two groups of people. So soccer people, you just tell them this is just like the FA Cup, and people generally know the FA Cup, and all the divisions all get into one big pot and have a big playoff to determine the champion. So that part's easy. For non-soccer people, I tend to use a baseball analogy. So like you just pick your local minor league baseball team. And so I'll use, here in Michigan, I'll use the Lansing Lugnuts, my hometown. They're a single A team. And so whenever I encounter people who don't know anything about soccer, I just use baseball as an example and say, well, if the Lansing Lugnuts could play in a March Madness style tournament where everybody, if you get far enough, you could play against New York Yankees. And they love that idea. Right. Every single person I've talked to, not just to be polite, they actually genuinely think that's fantastic. And then I even take it a step further and I say, well, what if, because single A baseball teams are professionals. What if you took your Sunday beer league team and put them in a March Madness style tournament? And if they made it far enough, they could play the New York Yankees. And then that's just too much for them usually. So it's really, you had it right. It is one of the most underrated sporting events in our sports landscape, not just soccer, although it really could use a boost in the soccer world, because there are still soccer people that I know who don't know about the U.S. Open Cup. So it's always fascinating to me that it's kind of like our best kept secret, but it's getting there. I think it's made some big strides in recent years to sort of break through, but it still needs a little bit of a push to become an event that I would say the average sports fan would tune into. I have friends who have no interest in sports, but when March Madness comes around, they fill out a bracket, sort of vaguely following what's happening. So I feel like the U.S. Open Cup could be that in maybe at its highest level.
Absolutely. I do want to set the stage. The reason why we're talking about this, obviously, it's round 2 of the U.S. Open Cup. The Pittsburgh Riverhounds, our Pittsburgh Riverhounds here, will be entering round 2 on Tuesday night, Highmark Stadium. They take on a team, the Maryland Bobcats. What do you know about Maryland Bobcats?
I don't know a lot about them, which is actually what's interesting about this tournament is because, I was looking, and if you want to see a part of the U.S. Open Cup that is maybe a reason for optimism is that you can place bets on the U.S. Open Cup.
Whoa.
And I was looking at some of even the first round games where they're all amateur teams, and even the most even me, I feel like I follow this tournament as closely as anybody. And some of these teams, especially a team like the Des Moines Menace, who year to year in the USL League 2 relies on college players, but because they moved the tournament to March, they can't use college players. So who knows what players they're going to pull out of the woodwork to play for these teams. So it's really a complete mystery as to how those teams, the NPSL teams, the USL League 2 teams, the amateur teams, what kind of team they're going to put together. And that's with Maryland, they're a new team in NISA, so they're a third division pro team,
right?
But they're just starting their season. So some of these teams, even if you know who they are, they're still very early in their seasons, and so you don't really know what you have yet. I think USL Championship has 3 or 4 games under its belt. I think NISA, I don't think there's a team that's played more than 3 games. So it's kind of a big mystery. So that's kind of what we try to do with our site, with the cup.us. We try to give people least some basic information on these games. And like right now, we are working on the preview for round 2, which is 31 games over 3 days. I got a chill just thinking about that. Like, there's a lot of work to be done this week. So that's kind of.
And I'm always happy to help when I can. And, we've had some really, in my last 7 years here in Pittsburgh, we've had some really fun experiences with the Open Cup. We've also had some periods of down we just haven't had much. And it's been a little bit of both. And so from the Riverhounds perspective in 2014, and you'll be excited to know, we are going to follow up this edition of Sounding Off on Soccer with a part 2, and I'm going to have 2 very special guests. One of those is going to be Rob Vincent, the former Pittsburgh Riverhound, former DC United player, and also the other guest will be Nick Noble, who used to play for the Harrisburg City Islanders. And what's fun is that they were both U.S. Open Cup heroes. Nick Noble, if you may recall, going back to 2012, was part of that Harrisburg City Islanders team that made a remarkable comeback against an MLS team at City Stadium in Harrisburg. So more on that, obviously, in the next show. But just I'm bringing this up because, we've had these memories. We've had some of these experiences. The Riverhounds in 2015 had a chance to play at Highmark Stadium, the only time since Highmark Stadium has been built where they hosted an MLS team. That was DC United. It turned into a showcase for Rob Vincent, who would be signed later in that following offseason to play. But his experience in the U.S. Open Cup definitely catapulted him into another level. But it also gave the Riverhounds and it gave the fans here in Pittsburgh something to get really excited about. I mean, Highmark Stadium was packed to the gills. I mean, you could not find a place to stand and watch the game.
And I think that's another thing for players. This is actually a huge showcase and we've seen so many examples of it, where a player performs well against a professional team, and then that professional team's like, hey, we should sign that back. And then they move up the ladder that way. I think it was Poku, who played with Miami FC, but he started off with the Georgia Revolution in the NPSL. And, he performed well against the Atlanta Silverbacks. And then the Atlanta Silverbacks were like, hey, that guy kicked our butts. We should maybe sign him. And then he worked his way up. He ended up signing with New York City FC and just working his way through the professional ranks. And he did it, I would say largely on the strength of his Open Cup performances, because it really is a great tryout. Really, I mean, you're kind of auditioning yourself for a larger audience, and you've got the coaching staff of the other team is a pretty good evaluator of a player that's, given your defense fits.
For sure. We've also seen the other side of it here in Pittsburgh. In recent years, we've seen the Lansdowne boys come here and beat the Riverhounds, and not only beat them 2-0, I believe it was in 2016. Later that week, the Riverhounds ended up firing their coach, Mark Steffens, at the time. It was just an awful loss, and it was obviously the final straw for Coach Steffens at that time, and for that team and the franchise. It was about as low as you can get.
Yeah, and losing at home too made it even worse. So I think. Yeah, while he was probably on thin ice at that point, from what I recall, and that was sort of probably a rare situation where an Open Cup performance kind of led to the firing of a coach. I sometimes, I feel like because the Open Cup doesn't have a broad mainstream appeal, that sometimes there can be some leeway, if a professional team crashes out early, whereas over in Europe, maybe in England or something, if a team crashes out of the FA Cup or the local the cup competition in that country, that could be a reason to can someone. But but we've seen more and more where the Open Cup has higher stakes for some of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. I mean, I guess it was more the embarrassment, but it was also the team had been faltering, and there was a Romeo Parks incident. There was some other things that were happening, and it was just needed to be a culture change. But it was just interesting that it was that, and then he was fired right after the next game. But Josh, the history, Pittsburgh, again, people don't realize in this area we have the Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers of steel country here, Pittsburgh Steeler country. It's very hard to really grasp and understand that soccer has a real significant history here, and a lot of it came in the Open Cup, didn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And you guys you had a bit of a drought in recent decades, but in the 1950s and 1940s, Pittsburgh was one of the hotspots in American soccer as far as the Open Cup goes. I mean, the Open Cup was and still is the national championship for this country, and you have Morgan Strasser and the Harmarville Hurricanes who were winning the Open Cup in the 40s and 50s. The Hurricanes were the last team to do it in 1956, and
right.
Since then have had a bit of a drought. But I mean, you've got, I think, 4 teams that are from the Pittsburgh area. I don't know my Pittsburgh geography well enough to know like where these neighborhoods are in respect to Pittsburgh proper, I guess, if you will, but the Pittsburgh area as four champions and to hang your hat on. So it's really cool that and they've had 14 Pennsylvania teams, so 10 of them out there in the Philadelphia area on the eastern side of the state. So
yeah. So Heidelberg, I don't know if Heidelberg won, but Heidelberg, Bridgeville area had one pocket, and those are like suburban, even when, back in the day before the suburbs really became what they are now, that was a pocket area. And Harmarville is just a little bit north of the city as well. And Harmarville, obviously, you mentioned, you referred to them. So they were little pockets on the edges, on the outskirts of the city, but definitely, obviously, Pittsburgh is built on immigration, many influx of population, the immigration waves of the turn of the 20th century, and there was just so many immigrants that came here, and actually even into all the way up to post World War II, there was still an influence. And then, like you said, something happened between the 50s and the 60s, and we probably know what that is. It's American football, obviously, and there was, years where the Steelers were sort of the third kind of team, the fourth team, but then once the 60s and especially into the 70s, that's when everything really flipped. But US Open,
and I think you were right about Heidelberg got to the final in like 51. So yeah, they didn't win it. So yeah, almost had your fifth there. And
I think Beedling has some history there too, but earlier Beedling teams, not in the 40s or 50s, I think are in the 20s. And so anyway, so that's just a snippet of the history. But again, let's go coming back into the recent years for us in Pittsburgh to embrace an amateur team, the Tartan Devils FC. I can't do this show without mentioning the Tartan Devils. I would get some slack from my friends with the club and the organization for sure, but they really provided the magic moment for the underdog Pittsburgh soccer moment. I believe it was 2017. Correct me if I'm wrong, and that was an Open Cup run, which included a win in the first round, and then having to host a game at Highmark Stadium. Unfortunately, I had to play Louisville City, who was a USL champion squad, and definitely struggled in that one. But still,
that was a big ask. Yeah, I love that you use struggle to describe a 9-0 loss.
I'm trying to be nice here, but
two very different teams on the field. Yeah, it's rough because usually in that second game, the first game is often a winnable game because it's usually against a fellow amateur team, and if you can get into the second round, you're usually going to play a pro team. And it's kind of up to the luck of the draw, and they try to regionalize things to minimize travel, so you're usually going to get a team in your neck of the woods. Unfortunately, Louisville is sort of in that neck of the woods where you are. So that was a rough year to play against City. So they paid the price for it.
All right, Josh. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. We only have a few minutes left, but just wanted to see, do you have any potential? This is my favorite part of March Madness. This is my favorite part of the U.S. Open Cup. Where do you see any potential upsets? Because we're in round 2 now. This is when it gets really fun.
There's a few games. A few people have asked me about. I have a hard time calling a USL League One win over a USL Championship. technically it is an upset. They are Division III to Division II, but like oftentimes like the gap between the two is not super big. So I guess if you were going to look at a team that like, I mean, based on their history, I feel like the Des Moines Menace being an amateur team and also being one that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have college players to play with, or at least they have to be if they're active college players. I mean, somebody graduated already, they could certainly use them, but if they're currently in school, they're not available until May. And I would say that one could be dicey for Union Omaha. I know that they had a great year last year in USL League One. I feel like that one could be a little dicey for them, just because Des Moines kind of has the monopoly on soccer in that side of Iowa. So they have a lot of players they can pull from. I think that one is tough. Northern Virginia FC against the Richmond Kickers.
Okay, team that we know, the Richmond Kickers, yeah.
Yeah, so but then again, like I mean, Northern Virginia FC just became a year-round team like 2 or 3 years ago, so they have a lot of talent to pull from in that in the Virginia area there and the DC area. I feel like, and they looked good in their last win and over Lynchburg. So I feel like those are kind of two that kind of jump out at me as potential, like an amateur team maybe taking out a pro team.
What about USL Championship and maybe NISA or the third division teams taking on MLS? And just explain briefly, if you can, how it's set up this year. I know MLS has some entries in the third round, and then everybody's in by the fourth round, correct?
Yeah. Basically, the way that the tournament, the way the rules are is that the tournament has to include all American-based professional teams. And as you know, like professional soccer in this country keeps growing year by year. And so it's actually made the tournament more difficult to put together because you just get more and more professional teams. And then it's kind of shrunk the number of amateur teams. So you have, they try to divide them up where they come in different parts of the tournament. Obviously the second round, you get USL Championship and USL League One and NISA. And then the third round, some of the Major League Soccer teams will come in. And then in the fourth round, the rest of them come in. So it used to be one round where Major League Soccer would just come into the tournament. And that was like, I think the FA Cup is like the fifth round. I can't remember what number round it is where the Premier League teams come in, and it's like a big deal. It's like, that's the round everyone looks forward to. It used to be the fourth round for the Open Cup, and now it's bled into the third round, which is disappointing because I feel like it's an exciting round when, like, basically in the third round, that if you win, you're going to play against a Major League Soccer team. That's a big prize for a lower division team. So that's kind of how it works out now. Is the amateur teams, or the lower division and the amateur teams, will get into the third round. Some Major League Soccer teams will be there, and then the rest of them will be in the fourth round. So and I know some people would love to see the tournament just like, let's just take all 103 teams and throw them into the first round and pick names out of a hat. Well, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do that because we have a giant country and travel is a huge issue. But also, I think only Germany does that. So it's not like this is like an unprecedented, format. Pretty much everybody does that, where the higher divisions come in later in the tournament. Right. So I kind of like it. You sort of beat each other up a little bit, and like the better teams come through, and it kind of gives the team something to strive for in the tournament. So
I think that makes sense. It's staggering. It just makes sense. But so set the stage here. So the Riverhounds can defeat Maryland. What happens with the U.S. Open Cup is there's a draw either usually a couple days after the playing window. It's usually really quick. It's a quick turnaround for the draw because they need 2 weeks or so to prepare for the next round and get all those arrangements taken care of. So Tuesday, the Riverhounds play. I think the game window stretches till Wednesday or Thursday, right? So the draw would be what, Thursday or Friday? Is that correct?
It's supposed to be on Friday, but you never know. I think they've been pretty decent at keeping the calendar for the most part. Obviously, there are always things that come up, and there was a protest in the first round that sort of threw a wrench into the organization of the tournament. So I think we could see it on Friday. It would be nice if they were able to do it beforehand, but I think the problem is they want to see the field that comes out of the second round to know where to put teams in the regional pods to make sure that they minimize travel so that we don't have too many of these, like we have a matchup in the second round where the Oakland Roots out on the West Coast are going to travel all the way to Greenville to play the Greenville Triumph. That's rough. That's a rough midweek travel for a lower division team. So I think they want to minimize that. So I think they're going to wait, see how the games come out. There's games on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they'll have the draw on Friday. And then we'll see who gets who.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's always a lot of fun, and there's a little madness and waiting to see who the next team. So what are the chances if the Riverhounds win? Could they play another USL team, another team that wins in the second round, or would they get one of those MLS teams? It's still up in the air, right?
Yeah, you don't really know, and we try to predict them on the site. Like we posted on the social media and to our Patreon contributors, and like just to throw like a fun, like here's what it might look like. And I think this year we've done pretty well with it, but in years past it's kind of a nightmare because it's really like you kind of pod the teams up, and then sort of like trying to predict March Madness, those bracketologists.
Yeah.
Is like once you make one mistake, or there's one team that gets sent out west, or or something, it really just like it's a domino effect, and it screws up the whole map when you're trying to predict these teams. So I really think, you've got DC. Obviously Pittsburgh has played DC United before. Mm-hmm. You've got in your region that you could be matched up against. I would really look regionally and just see like who are the teams that are in our neck of the woods, and depending on how the numbers shake out, we'll see who they end up getting. Hopefully, for their sake, they're able to get a Major League Soccer team, because I think the Riverhounds are due for a big Open Cup win. It's been a while since they pulled back.
Yeah, and we can go way back into the early part of the century. They beat the Colorado Rapids at, I believe, when they were still playing at Bethel Park Stadium, and a high school stadium. The DC United game was very exciting. They've only since the DC United game have they played in the against an MLS team, I believe, just one time, and that was in 2019 when Bob Lilly's Hounds went to play at Columbus and lost just a 1-0 game. That I think they showed well for themselves, but they really couldn't get any attack going there. But so this is the return. So the return to the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup will commence for the Pittsburgh Riverhounds on Tuesday night. Josh, thank you so much for joining me on Sounding Off on Soccer. Your knowledge, you're always the guy I refer to when it comes to the Open Cup. And so again, just one more time for anybody watching or listening, tell us about your site, how to find out information about the Open Cup, especially your coverage over the next few days.
Yeah, we're going to be busy. The cup.us is the site. We are at US Open Cup on all the social media platforms. We try to keep those up to date. We have Twitter updates of all the games, and we'll have all the video links as the games are going on. Of course, we're always looking for help with John, you've obviously been a big help in the Pittsburgh area. We're always looking for help with writers and graphics people and website people, you name it. Like there's so many things that would make our coverage even better. If we get the more people we have on board, the better. Just send us an email. We have a contact us link on our website. And of course, we're trying to raise money to fix up the site. That's something we're finalizing right now. Give the site a little bit of a redo and have that making things easier to find, because I feel like there's 107 years of history, and so we try to make it as easy to find as possible. So we have a Patreon account set up. So if anybody would like to join that and support what we're doing, we appreciate any and all help. So that's pretty much my spiel. So thanks for having me on.
Josh, it's been it's been great to connect with you and see you virtually, but maybe one of these days we'll actually connect in person, maybe a future Riverhounds Detroit game or something like that. But again, thanks for joining
It's
me.
very possible.
Can't wait to see things. Can't wait till Tuesday.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be a good time. Looking forward to it.
All right.